There's going to be right much welding going on right here. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my leather, keep from burning this fleece up any more than what it already is. It does not hold sparks back very well. But yeah, we're going to get this thing welded out today. Now that we decided that the rear axle is the route we're going to next, we'll talk about some of the hardware we're going to use. You can see the agri supply box over there that the parts came in. That's where the customer got them from. That's where I recommended to get them from. These are the leaf springs. They run about, I think it was like $25 a piece instead of a big brand name at like Tractor Supply. You're probably going to pay about 50 bucks for it. So maybe half, maybe not quite half the price, but still the same quality, probably made in the same factory, shipped out of a different door. But they come with the plastic bushings in them. They make these little baggies here right next to it in the same aisle. You can pick up rubber bushings if you feel more comfortable wanting to replace those. These plastic bushings here I've never had any trouble with, so I don't intend on replacing them. The rest of the hardware here in these bags are what we call leaf spring bolts. Reason being is they're slotted here at the top, and what that does is digs into the metal so that the bolt will not move, and the leaf spring will actually rotate around that, the plastic. These are lock nuts. They are not actually stamped. Okay, yes they are, I stand corrected. Let's pull this out. I doubt you'll be able to see it, but on one end of it, it's divoted right here, and what that does is it crushes the threads right here. So once this is threaded on, it's basically a locking nut out of principle. Not dimple side, screws on, dimples facing out. Right there, I can already tell that's where the threads are crushed because it won't go past that point. Once I really ratchet down on this thing, it'll push through, but it's basically a locking nut at that point. And it shouldn't be undone because it will not come undone on its own. That's the whole principle. You're going down the road, you don't, all these parts are moving, you don't want that nut coming off, or you're gonna have a bad day. The other pieces are gonna be your mounting brackets. You can tell that these two are bigger than these two. The reason for that is the bigger ones go in the front and the leaf spring sits inside of it. Get that mounted up on the back. Now the back is tricky. Maybe you can see it back here, but this is actually mounted above the spring. You notice the spring can't fit in there because it's about the same dimension. It sits above it, and then we have what we call shackle plates that go on the outside of this that mount this from this, and they allow for you to move the angle of the trailer. Those shackles, before you tighten them down, you set the spring where you want it as far as flat, forward, rear facing. You can change the angles on it, and that helps for the load. That helps distribute which way the weight of the bounce. So you got load in the trailer, that weight's coming down, where are you going to transfer that to? And them shackles allow you to dictate where that weight is transferred as far as orientation into the spring. As I've said before, we're duplicating this trailer, and the issue I'm running into with mounting this, the axle setup, is that these are 25-inch, 25 and a quarter eye to eye, whereas the old springs that are down here are, I believe they were like 19 inches. So what I mean by that, let me see, what I do with my tape measure, handy dandy tape measure, go gadget tape measure. If I line this up in the center of the eye, pull to this eye, we're right at 25 and a quarter. If I come down here and run it eye to eye, ooh, we're looking 19 and a quarter. So about 6 inches of difference that we've got to figure out. Basically, I would have just pulled measurements from front and found the center of this mounting bracket, gone over to the new trailer frame and mounted it there. The first issue we're going to run into is the fact that this leaf spring is longer than the other one. This is about 25 and a quarter to 25 and 3/8 center to center. As you can see down here, we're at about 19 and a quarter. How do we go about fixing this first issue? The easiest thing to do is to center the trailer, or center the axle to the trailer. So we're going to find where the axle lines up now. Remember, we pull our measurements from the front of the trailer just so that all our measurements are the same. And you can tell that this right here is about 41 and a quarter, which on that side is 41 and a half. So it's about a quarter difference. Again, this is not the stock axle. This is something that was kind of thrown up under here later. But he says it pulls fine with it like it is, so this is the measurement we're going to go with. So if we know that this is sitting at 41 and a half, then I know that it's going to sit in the center of this spring. Then I need to put this front eye bolt 12, let's say 25 and a quarter divided in half. You're looking about 12 and 5/8. So I'm going to go from 41 and a half, measure back 12 and 5/8, and I'm going to weld or tack the front bracket on with that eye hole, or the hole in the bracket lining up with that, whatever that dimension is going to be. After going through that whole spiel about how I'm going to mount the trailer spring there, I remembered that the customer and I had a conversation about how the new axle was wider than the old axle, or not that the axle was wider, but that the spring perches that are on the axle are wider out, because when he built it, couldn't remember exactly where they were, so he gave the guy a rough estimate. So the trailer here is 48 inches. The spring perches outside are 49 and I think a quarter maybe. And what the spring perch is the metal bracket that's welded on to the axle that the spring mounts to. Because the spring is flat, the axle is round, they don't mate up too good. So you take a bracket that's flat, weld it to the round axle, and then you can have flat on flat, which makes it a whole lot better on that spring. And I told the customer during that conversation the easiest thing for me to do would be to take some flat stock that I have, weld it to the bottom of the trailer, and then it was actually wider than the trailer frame, and that would allow me to weld the spring bracket to the bottom of that, and I could shift the spring bracket side to side however far I needed to. And that goes back into the pre-planning and a whole lot of customization and figuring stuff out ahead of time, because I can be honest, I completely forgot about that. Glad I figured it out before I started tacking this stuff up. But so now that we got that, I've got to go cut some flat stock.